The 37th floor of Lancaster Industries was a cathedral of glass and steel, where power pulsed through every polished surface. Marble floors gleamed under fluorescent lights, reflecting the hurried steps of executives in tailored suits and the sharp clack of stilettos that sliced through the air like a metronome. The hum of ambition never ceased, phones buzzing, keyboards clattering, voices negotiating deals that could shift markets. No one paused. No one whispered. And no one, not once, noticed the janitor. Mark Dawson, 42, bent over his mop, his calloused hands wringing out the last drops of soapy water with slow, practiced care. His faded blue uniform hung loosely on his lean frame, the collar frayed from years of wear. His face was weathered. Deep-set gray-blue eyes shadowed by tired lines, a slightly crooked nose from a long-ago bar fight, thin lips that rarely smiled, and thick dark eyebrows that seemed permanently furrowed. His short salt-and-pepper hair was tucked under a worn cap, and a faint scar ran across his left knuckle, a remnant of a night he tried not to remember. Mark was white American, born in a small Massachusetts town, and his presence was as unremarkable as the mop he pushed. He didn't look up when executives swept by, their briefcases swinging. He didn't flinch at the barked orders of assistants into headsets, and he certainly didn't meet the eyes of Arden Lancaster, the CEO, whose icy presence could silence a room faster than any boardroom gavel. Arden, 38, was untouchable, her authority woven into every step. Her almond-shaped green eyes, sharp and unyielding, missed nothing. Her straight nose and high cheekbones framed a face that was both striking and severe. Her full lips painted a subtle red, always set in a line of control. Her dark blonde hair was pulled into a flawless bun, not a strand out of place, and her tailored navy blazer and pencil skirt hugged her frame with precision. A single pearl pendant hung at her neck, an understated nod to elegance. White American, born into wealth, she carried the weight of Lancaster Industries like a crown she could never set down. Her heels, black, pointed, expensive, clicked with purpose, each step a declaration of her dominion. Mark didn't mind her indifference. Being invisible had its advantages. It let him move through the world without questions, without expectations, without the pain of being seen, until today. The scream came without warning, a raw, animalistic wail that shattered the 37th floor's sterile rhythm. It wasn't a tantrum or a cry for attention. It was pure, unfiltered terror, the kind that clawed at the air and froze even the most hardened executives in their tracks. A boy, maybe 8, had crumpled to the floor outside the executive conference room. His small body curled inward, fists clenched so tightly his knuckles whitened, his face red from the force of his screams. His hazel eyes, wide and frantic, darted wildly, overwhelmed by the fluorescent glare, the echo of voices, the hum of printers, the towering windows that seemed to press the world too close. His brown curls stuck to his sweaty forehead, and his navy sweater was bunched at the elbows, revealing thin wrists. A nervous assistant, a young woman with a tight ponytail, hovered nearby, her hands fluttering uselessly. "It's okay, Leo, it's okay," she murmured, her voice trembling with panic. But the boy, Leo, though Mark didn't know his name yet, was beyond words. The world was too loud, too bright, too much. No one moved. The executives stood frozen, their briefcases clutched like shields. The assistant's words dissolved into the boy's screams. The air grew thick with tension, a collective holding of breath. And then quietly Mark Dawson set down his mop. He didn't rush. He didn't speak. He didn't ask permission. He reached into the pocket of his utility apron, his scarred knuckle brushing the fabric, and pulled out a nearly empty bottle of glass cleaner. The plastic was scratched, the label peeling, but it held just enough liquid. Slowly, carefully, he turned it upside down and blew. A tiny, iridescent bubble wobbled out of the nozzle, imperfect and fragile, catching the harsh fluorescent light in a shimmer of blue and violet. It drifted into the artificial air, a small secret defying the chaos. Leo's scream stopped mid-breath. His hazel eyes, still wet with tears, tracked the bubble's path, his chest heaving slower now. The bubble floated, wobbled, then popped with a soft kiss of silence. Leo let out a shaky breath, his fists loosening slightly. Mark crouched beside him, careful not to touch, and blew another bubble. Then another. 3 bubbles, each one a quiet offering. Leo's fingers, previously clawed into fists, relaxed further. His breathing steadied. His gaze locked on the floating orbs. The assistant blinked, her hands dropping to her sides. The executives exchanged glances, their murmurs stilled. And then she appeared. Ardan Lancaster stood in the hallway, framed by glass and power. Her heels had stopped clicking, her arms folded tightly across her chest. Her green eyes, usually so controlled, flickered with something raw, shock perhaps, or fear. Her assistant had paged her from a board meeting, something about her son, a meltdown, an emergency. But she hadn't expected this. Her brilliant, troubled, beautiful son, kneeling quietly on the marble floor, entranced by a bottle of glass cleaner and a man in a faded blue uniform. And she definitely hadn't expected to see Leo reach out and take that man's hand. For a moment, no one spoke. The air was heavy with the weight of the impossible. Then Ardan's voice, sharp as a blade, cut through the stillness. "What do you think you're doing?" Mark stood slowly, his gray-blue eyes steady, not defiant. He didn't release Leo's hand. Leo held on too tightly. "I was just trying to help," Mark said, his voice low, calm. "Like the rustle of leaves in a quiet forest." "You're not qualified to help," Ardan snapped, her jaw tight, her pearl pendant catching the light. Her assistant stepped forward, hesitant. "Miss Lancaster, I can take him—" Ardan raised a hand, silencing her. "Get him to the private room on 38, now!" Her tone was final, but her eyes lingered on Leo, who still clung to Mark's hand. "Leo, come with Mommy." Leo shook his head, his curls bouncing, his hazel eyes fixed on Mark. The janitor crouched again, whispering something too soft for Ardan to hear. Whatever it was, it worked. Leo looked at his mother, then slowly let go of Mark's hand. The assistant gently guided him away, her steps quick and nervous. Mark remained kneeling, staring at the spot where a bubble had popped on the marble floor, leaving a faint wet mark. Ardan's gaze locked onto him as he rose. Her green eyes were piercing, searching for something to pin this moment on. Blame, perhaps, or gratitude she wasn't ready to feel. "What's your name?" "Mark Dawson," he said, his voice even. "I assume you're contracted through facilities?" "Yes, ma'am." She paused, her lips pursing slightly. "Finish mopping this floor, then report to security." Mark nodded. "Yes, ma'am." He didn't flinch, didn't explain. He just returned to his mop, moving with the same quiet grace he always had. Ardan turned, her heels clicking once more, but something in her chest twisted as she walked away. For the first time in months, maybe years, her son had reached for someone, and it wasn't her. The security office on the ground floor smelled of stale coffee and damp carpet, a stark contrast to the pristine 37th floor. Mark sat on a worn plastic chair in the corner, his hands folded neatly in his lap, his scarred knuckle barely visible. He wasn't cuffed, wasn't under arrest, but the assistant manager's glare from behind the desk felt like an accusation all its own. The man, heavy-set with thinning hair and an ill-fitting blazer, flipped through papers with unnecessary drama. 2 security guards whispered behind a cracked monitor, one glancing at Mark as if he might bolt. But Mark didn't move. He'd been still for years. "Dawson, right?" "Mark Dawson?" the manager said, sniffing. "Yes, sir," Mark replied, his gray-blue eyes steady. "Facilities contract says you've been here 8 months. No complaints until now." The man raised an eyebrow, waiting for Mark to fill the silence. Mark gave a polite nod. Nothing more. "You were told to avoid executive floors unless scheduled. You're assigned to 19 through 35, so what were you doing on 37? "I was filling in," Mark said simply. The regular janitor called out sick. "Dispatch sent me up." "Convenient," the man muttered, leaning forward. "And the CEO's son just happened to be there." Mark stayed silent. "Some moments didn't need defending. Do you realize the liability here?" The manager continued, his voice rising. "You approached the child of a major executive without clearance. What if something had gone wrong? What if she files a complaint?" Mark met his eyes unflinching. "I didn't touch the boy. I just blew a bubble." The manager stared, then waved a hand as if the explanation was too absurd to engage with. "You'll be written up." We'll see if facilities keeps you on. Wait here." The door opened without a knock. Sophie Chen, 45, stepped in, her presence commanding despite her casual navy sweater and slacks. Her black hair was streaked with gray, pulled into a loose ponytail, and her dark brown eyes carried a quiet intensity. White American, she'd traded her classroom for HR years ago, but her teacher's instinct never faded. She didn't wait to be acknowledged. "You can go," she told the manager, her voice firm but not harsh. "I'll take it from here. But HR oversight. Contracted staff are under my jurisdiction," Sophie said, her tone leaving no room for argument. The manager hesitated, then shuffled out, his ego bruised but intact. Sophie turned to Mark, arms crossed, not out of hostility but thoughtfulness. She studied him, her gaze sharp but kind. "I saw the report," she said, holding up a thin folder. "Then I asked for your file. There's almost nothing in here. No education history, no references, just a note that you declined to provide prior employment verification." She raised an eyebrow. "You're not who you say you are you?" Mark let out a quiet breath. "I never said who I was. I just took the job." "Right." Sophie's voice softened. "That kid Leo, he's not easy. Ardon's tried half the specialists in Boston, and he reached for you like he's known you forever." Mark looked at the floor, his gray-blue eyes distant. It wasn't anything. "He just needed something simple, something quiet, glass cleaner and bubbles?" Sophie asked, a hint of a smile tugging at her lips. His mouth lifted barely. "Kids don't care what it's called." "They care how it feels." Sophie was quiet for a moment. "I used to teach," she said finally. "Special education before HR, I know what I saw upstairs. That wasn't an accident." She stepped closer. "I don't know what happened to you, but I think you've been helping people a lot longer than you've been mopping floors." Mark's throat tightened. It had been years since anyone spoke to him like that, without pity or judgment. Then Sophie did something unexpected. She pulled a folded paper from her coat pocket and laid it on the desk. It was a legal form, a notice of petition for family court. "Family Services has an amnesty window this quarter," she said. "You can file for reevaluation for visitation, maybe more." Mark stared at the paper like it was a ghost. "How do you know about Emma?" "I didn't," Sophie replied gently. "But I do now." He leaned back, closing his eyes for a moment. Then he told her, the night the car slid on black ice, the hospital's sterile hum, the silence that followed. His wife, Clara, gone in an instant. Their daughter, Emma, taken by her grandparents, who saw his grief as instability. He'd stopped working, stopped speaking, stopped everything except showing up to custody hearings where he lost every time. "I see her twice a month," he said quietly. "Supervised. I bring art supplies. She always draws bubbles." Sophie didn't speak, just listened. Mark's eyes sharpened. "Don't tell Ardon." "I won't. She thinks I'm a janitor." "You are," Sophie said, smiling. "You just used to be more." Mark's fingers brushed the edge of the petition but didn't pick it up. The intercom buzzed. "HR," a voice crackled. "Miss Lancaster is requesting Mark Dawson on 37 immediately." Sophie stared at the speaker, then at Mark. "Well," she said, "sounds like you've got another appointment." Mark stood, his movements slow but deliberate. "Thank you," he said, turning back to her. "Don't thank me yet," Sophie replied. "You're heading into the lion's den." Mark gave a small smile. "I've been in worse." The 37th floor was too quiet when Mark stepped off the elevator, his utility cart squeaking faintly. His uniform was still damp from the morning's work, his shoes leaving soft scuffs on the tile. The frosted door of the executive suite stood slightly ajar, a sliver of sunlight spilling out. Someone was waiting. He knocked once lightly. "Come in," Ardon's voice called, controlled but softer than before. The office was a study in modern elegance, floor-to-ceiling windows framing a Boston skyline that shimmered like a dream. Sleek furniture in neutral tones, a minimalist desk with a single orchid in a glass vase. But the room's heart wasn't the view. It was Leo, curled on a low couch by the window, scribbling in a notebook. His movements were tight, repetitive, but focused, his hazel eyes locked on the page. He didn't look up. Ardon stood behind her desk, her navy blazer unbuttoned, revealing a silk blouse. Her green eyes were less guarded now, but still calculating, her pearl pendant glinting as she moved. She didn't waste time. "My son," she said, nodding toward Leo, "hasn't reacted to anyone like that. Ever. Not therapists, not teachers, not family." Mark said nothing, his gray-blue eyes steady. "What did you say to him?" she asked, circling the desk, her arms folding. "I didn't," Mark replied. "I didn't say anything." "Exactly." She paced once, then stopped near the couch, her voice lowering. "He responded to your stillness. You weren't trying to fix him. You just let him be." Mark's gaze flicked to Leo, who was drawing circles, dozens of them, swirling across the page like ripples on water. "I've seen that before," he said quietly. Ardon's eyes narrowed. "Where?" He hesitated. "In children who've built entire worlds inside their heads. Sometimes the quiet ones are listening the hardest." She studied him, her lips pursing slightly. Then she stepped closer. "I want to offer you something, temporarily." Mark blinked. "An offer?" "I'm not asking you to be a therapist," Ardon said quickly, as if the idea offended her. "I want you to be here. Just here when Leo is in this space. I've converted an HR room next door. He seems calmer when you're near." Mark exhaled slowly. "I'm not trained anymore." She raised an eyebrow. "You didn't seem to need training yesterday." He shook his head. "I'm not the same person I was back then." "No one is," she replied. "That's not the point." He looked at the floor, then back at her. "This isn't a promotion." "No," she agreed. "It's trust." They stood there, two people with nothing in common, tethered by the fragile calm of the child in the corner. Finally, Mark nodded. "I'll try, but I'm not promising results." Ardon's lips lifted, the closest thing to a smile he'd seen from her. "I don't want results. I want my son to stop screaming every morning." She tapped her tablet, her fingers swift. "You'll be contracted through HR with adjusted hours. Sophie's aware. The room's ready." She paused. "And Mark? Don't blow bubbles in the boardroom." He almost smiled. The converted HR room was small, unadorned, a far cry from the executive suite. A soft gray rug muffled footsteps, a beanbag sat in one corner, and a low table held a few storage bins. A single window let in muted daylight, softening the harsh edges of the corporate world outside. It was quiet, warm, safe. Leo sat on the rug, his sketch pad open, his navy sweater bunched at the elbows. Mark took a seat across the room, not too close, just present. He didn't speak, didn't interfere. He waited. 10 minutes passed, maybe 15. Then, without warning, Leo stood, walked over, and placed the sketch pad in Mark's lap. It was a drawing of bubbles, dozens of them, floating, overlapping, some popping mid-air. In the bottom corner, a stick figure held a bubble wand, its blue shirt unmistakable. Mark traced a finger along the page. He'd seen thousands of drawings like this in his old life, from children grasping at the world when words felt like storms. But this one wasn't about escape. It was about connection. He looked up, but Leo had returned to his corner, content. In that still moment, Mark felt something he hadn't in years. Purpose. Not ambition, not redemption, just purpose. Outside, Arden watched through the frosted glass, her arms folded. She didn't understand what she was seeing, but she felt it. The tightness in her chest loosened, just a fraction. By the third morning, the room had changed. Not in ways a decorator would notice, no sensory walls or white noise machines, but in small, quiet ways. Leo had started stacking sketch pads by color on a shelf. Mark had brought a bottle of dish soap and water, taping a smiley face to the side. It wasn't therapy. It wasn't strategy. It was just magic, the way a bubble caught the light. Leo never laughed out loud, but a half-smile tugged at his lips when he followed the bubbles, as if something inside wanted to be louder but wasn't ready. Mark understood that feeling better than anyone. Ardon passed the observation window daily, her curiosity turning to fascination. Mark never did anything impressive. No songs, no games, no flashcards like the specialists. But Leo sat closer each day, stayed longer, drew more, calmed faster. And when Leo whispered a sound, a syllable, a hum, Ardon found herself pausing, her meetings scheduled around these moments. The whispers started among the staff. "That janitor, what's his deal?" The CEO's kid is obsessed with him. Did you see how he got Leo to stop rocking just by tapping his fingers? Some were curious, others suspicious. Arden didn't care. Not yet. That Thursday, Leo walked in with a different sketch pad, spiral-bound red cover. He handed it to Mark without a word, then sat in his corner. Mark opened it slowly. Pages upon pages of bubbles, some small, some massive, some colored, others shaded in charcoal. But in the center of every page was the same stick figure in a blue shirt. Mark's chest tightened. He blinked harder than usual. Leo was watching, waiting, expecting something. Mark cleared his throat and pointed to the figure. "This is me." Leo didn't answer, but he slid his fingers together twice, mimicking the motion Mark used to snap open the bubble wand. It wasn't just acknowledgement. It was connection. Later, in the HR lounge, Sophie approached Mark as he wiped down the kitchenette counter. She held a coffee, her eyes sharp. "He's opened up more in 5 days than in 5 years, she said. "You're doing something right." "I'm just being here," Mark replied, his rag moving in slow circles. "They're talking, you know. People upstairs wondering why a janitor's babysitting the CEO's son." "Let them talk," Mark said. "I will," Sophie said softer. "But they won't forever." She sipped her coffee. "You ever think about doing this again? For real?" Mark paused, his hand hovering. "I used to. Back when I thought I could fix things." "You're not fixing anything," Sophie said. "You're showing up." Mark looked away. "That's what scares me." That night, passing the reflective glass wall on the ground floor, Mark caught his reflection. Same uniform, same mop bucket, same slouched posture. But for a moment, he saw the stick figure from Leo's drawing, standing under a sky of bubbles, holding a wand like it mattered. For the first time in years, he didn't look away. Arden Lancaster rarely hesitated. In boardrooms, she was a force, her green eyes cutting through doubt like a scalpel. But that Friday, in her glass-walled office, a printed file folder trembled in her hands. Mark Dawson. Barely a page. Contract employee, no degree, no recent work history, no red flags, no clarity. Arden hated ambiguity. She'd sent a discreet request to IT for context, not a full background check. Leadership required understanding, she told herself. The report revealed a decade-old truth. Mark had been a behavior interventionist, renowned at a neurodevelopment center, with certifications, published papers, and glowing letters. Then the accident, black ice, a highway crash, his wife dead. He'd been driving, not at fault, but the whispers followed. He left the field, the city, and 4 months later, lost custody of his daughter, Emma, to her grandparents. No record since, just silence. Arden gripped her desk, her pearl pendant cold against her skin. She wasn't sure what unsettled her more, that Mark was hiding something, or that his secret was pain, not scandal. That evening, Mark was in the garage, wiping down the company van, though his shift had ended. Staying busy was safer than his empty studio apartment. The tap of heels on concrete startled him. Arden stood there, arms crossed, a thick folder in hand. "I read it," she said. Mark set the rag down. "I figured you might. I had to know who I was letting near my son." He nodded. "And now that you know?" She hesitated. "He trusts you." "More than he trusts me. That's not easy to admit." Mark stayed silent. She stepped closer, her voice steady. "You worked with children like Leo. You were gifted," they said. "I was married," Mark said quietly. "I was a father." "I thought that was enough." Arden's jaw tightened. She knew that feeling too well. "I lost her in seconds," he added. "But it took years to lose myself. That was slower." "You still see your daughter?" she asked. "Twice a month, supervised. She doesn't talk much, but she draws. Bubbles mostly." He smiled faintly. "Her mom bought her a bubble machine. Said it was like watching happiness float." Arden swallowed. "I don't know how to be what Leo needs." Mark met her eyes. "Stop trying to be something. Just be there." The next morning, Arden arrived early before the bustle of emails and assistants. She stood in the observation hallway, watching Mark and Leo in the converted room. Mark sat cross-legged, his arms resting on his knees. Leo stood beside him, drawing on the window with a whiteboard marker, lines, circles, shapes. Then, softly, barely audible, Leo spoke. Mark didn't move, Didn't praise, just tapped his finger twice on the rug. Leo tried again. B. He pointed to the window, a bubble drawn in imperfect loops. Ardan pressed her hand to her chest, her throat clenching. It wasn't a sentence, but it was sound, willingly given. She didn't cry. Ardan Lancaster didn't cry, but she wanted to. That afternoon, Sophie found Mark on the back steps, sipping coffee from a styrofoam cup. She tossed him a granola bar. "You ever going to file that petition?" Mark tapped the cup against his knee. Still thinking. "You're not fooling anyone anymore," Sophie said. "Not to Leo, not to Ardan." Mark shook his head. "I'm not sure I remember how to let people believe in me." "That's the easy part," Sophie said. "You just show up, and you don't leave." Mark exhaled, and for the first time in years it didn't feel heavy. The 38th floor conference room was a fortress of glass and chrome, its long table seating power and pride. Arden stood at the head, her green eyes betraying a storm she kept hidden. Mark stood to the side, a clipboard in hand, invited against the board's wishes. Leo sat beside his mother, clutching a worn stuffed elephant, its ear stitched haphazardly. Elliot Crane, 60, slick gray hair and polished cufflinks, spoke first. "We appreciate Mr. Dawson's progress with your son," he said, barely nodding at Mark. "But this company is not a therapy center. Our new campaign, Voices Beyond Words, will showcase our commitment to inclusion. Featuring Leo is brilliant branding." Ardan's jaw tightened. "He's not a brand." "Of course not," Elliot said, smiling thinly. "He's a symbol of progress. Imagine, a child without words leading a global movement." Mark spoke, his voice sharp. "Children with autism aren't symbols. They're kids, vulnerable. Your campaign isn't about Leo, it's about how he can serve you." Silence coiled the room. Elliot turned, condescending. "With respect, Mr. Dawson, you were hired to clean floors, not critique messaging." "With respect," Mark said, unflinching, "I was hired to stay invisible. But Leo saw me anyway." A few heads turned. Elliot waved a hand. "We're rehearsing the speech. Miss Lancaster, bring your son to the front." Ardan hesitated. "He's not ready." "We need a visual," Elliot pressed. "He just needs to stand beside you." She stood slowly, her heart tight. "Come on, sweetheart," she whispered, touching Leo's hand. He followed at first, but near the front, under the glaring lights, he froze. His breathing quickened, his fingers curling around the elephant. "Leo," she said softly. "It's okay," but his eyes darted, every stare a siren. He shrank back. "Mark!" he shouted, raw and loud. The room froze. Arden's hand dropped. Mark stepped forward, then stopped at the glass wall. "Mark!" Leo cried again, tears streaming. Mark moved past Ardan, past the hierarchy, and knelt. "I'm here, buddy," he whispered, arms open. Leo ran to him, sobbing into his shoulder. The boardroom stilled. Sophie in the doorway wiped a tear. Arden sank into a chair, her hand over her mouth, trembling. Her son had spoken. Not Mama, but Mark. "He said your name," she whispered, her voice breaking. Mark nodded, holding Leo. "Yes, and he meant it." The boardroom emptied, but the silence lingered. Mark sat on the carpet, Leo curled in his lap, the boy's breath evening out. The stuffed elephant lay beside them. Leo's small hand clutched Mark's shirt, as if letting go would undo everything. Arden stood a few feet away, her green eyes soft, unguarded. "Has he ever held on like that to anyone?" "No," Mark said, brushing Leo's hair. "Not that I've seen." She lowered herself to the rug, her tailored slacks creasing. "I didn't mean to overstep," Mark said. "You didn't," she replied. "You saved him," Mark exhaled. "There were years after Emma was taken when I didn't speak. Just did what I had to do. My world became about staying close enough to see her grow, even if she didn't see me." Arden's eyes flicked to him. "Emma's your daughter?" He nodded. 8 years old. "She used to draw me bubble wishes every night. After her mom passed, she stopped drawing. I stopped being allowed to visit." Arden's throat tightened. Leo stirred, then stood and placed a drawing in her lap. 3 stick figures, man, woman, child, under a sky of bubbles. She covered her mouth. "Mama, smile," Leo said softly. Her eyes filled. She looked at Mark, seeking permission to believe. He nodded. Mark stood outside a modest Dorchester townhouse, custody documents in hand. Arden stood beside him, her coat collar up against the wind. Inside was Emma, 8, 1,000 days older since he'd held her. He rang the bell. Mrs. Landry, 60s, opened the door a crack. "Mr. Dawson," she said, glancing at Arden, "they told me you might come." "Is she okay?" Mark asked, his voice unsteady. "She's quiet today," Mrs. Landry said. "Drawing." Mark stepped inside, the house smelling of lavender and pencil shavings. Emma sat cross-legged on the carpet, a yellow hoodie too big, her brown hair in a loose braid. Colored pencils were scattered around her. She looked up, her hazel eyes, Clara's eyes, widening. "Hey, Bubble Girl," Mark said, crouching, his voice cracking. Emma dropped her pencil. "I still have your drawings," he said. "The pink and purple bubbles. I kept every one." She stood, walked to him, and touched his stubble. "You got old?" she whispered. Mark laughed, tears threatening. "Yeah, it happens when you miss someone every day." Emma hugged him, a full-body melt. "I'm here, sweet pea," he whispered. "Not going anywhere this time?" Arden watched from the doorway, Leo beside her, holding his elephant and bubble wand. Emma noticed Leo, who offered the wand. She took it curious. "What's this?" Leo blew a bubble. "Cool," Emma whispered. "I'm Emma," she said, extending her hand. Leo shook it, looking to Mark, who nodded. Arden sat beside them. "Are you a doctor?" Emma asked. "No," Arden said, smiling. "A friend of your dad's." "You don't look like his friend," Emma said, wrinkling her nose. Arden laughed. "I'll take that as a compliment." The Lancaster Industries atrium pulsed with life, music, laughter, children playing with sensory toys. Banners read voices beyond words. Leo stood on a platform, clutching a crinkled drawing, flanked by Arden and Mark. Arden spoke, her voice soft, heartfelt. "I used to believe leadership was about control. I was wrong. Sometimes the most powerful thing is to stop talking and start listening." She knelt beside Leo. "Would you like to show them?" Leo raised the drawing, 3 figures under a bubble-filled sky, labeled Dad, Mom, Me. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Mark's breath caught. Arden blinked rapidly. Leo held the paper steady. The audience rose, clapping. Arden returned to the microphone. "This isn't about giving voices. It's about honoring them." Mark stepped forward. "Every child is telling us something. The question is, are we listening?" In the green room, Leo and Emma sat on a sofa, Emma showing him how to pop a juice box straw. Her drawing featured 4 figures and a dog labeled Bubble. Arden and Mark watched, their arms nearly touching. "You were incredible," Mark said. "I just told the truth," Arden replied. "You told it beautifully." She reached for his hand. "I don't know what this is yet, but I don't want to do it alone." "You're not," Mark said. Leo tugged Arden's sleeve, holding up the drawing. "Keep it," he said. Her breath caught. "Thank you," she whispered. Leo turned to Mark. "Daddy, happy." Mark knelt, tears welling. "Yeah, buddy." "I really am." Arden leaned in and kissed Mark softly. Leo smiled. The Sycamore Hill house was no longer just a shelter. Sunlight danced through gauzy curtains. The kitchen smelled of cinnamon, and Leo's hum filled the air. He built a lopsided block tower, whispering to each piece. Arden wrapped her arms around Mark from behind. "He's been up since 6, building a tower to the clouds." Mark smiled. "I used to think he'd never speak. I used to think I'd never feel safe in a place like this." Outside, Emma chased Leo through wild grass, laughter echoing. Sophie sipped iced tea, watching. "He's telling knock-knock jokes now," she said. "He said, 'Leo, me.'" Mark chuckled. "Kid's got comedic timing." "You didn't have to do anything," Sophie said. "You just stayed." That night, Arden brought out a wooden box. Inside was a paintbrush, bubble solution, and a note. "To Leo, may your voice never be measured by volume, but by the light it brings." "Blow with me," Leo said. They dipped the wand, blowing bubbles into the dusk, shimmering like prayers. "What did today's bubbles say?" Mark asked. Arden smiled. "They said, home." Later, at Leo's bedside, Arden and Mark lingered. Paintings covered the walls, the bubble wand on the table. Arden slipped her hand into Mark's. "I was scared," she whispered. Of being enough. You are, Mark said. Because you stayed. I want to build something with you, she said. Just this, us. Let's do it, he said. One quiet moment at a time. Sometimes. The most powerful stories are whispered through crayons. Bubbles, a child saying, I'm home. Home isn't walls or windows. It's patience, second chances, a bubble carrying a word the heart finally understands.